We now move on to the second session titled Past is the Present, Maritime History, Memorials, Museums and Exhibition Spaces, which will be moderated by Commodore Ajay Chitnis, Shaurya Chakra and Nausena Medal. Commodore Ajay Chitnis is the Vice President of IMF, Indian Maritime Foundation. He has a vast and varied experience starting with his long, illustrious career in the Indian Navy as a helicopter pilot and post-retirement in the offshore maritime industry. He is a recipient of 2 gallantry awards, the Shaurya Chakra and the Nausena Medal. He has been associated with these joint seminars since their inception, and we admire the ease with which he conducts these sessions. Commodore Chitnis, the pitch is all ready.
Thank you very much, Meera, for the kind words of introduction. You know, when I saw this WhatsApp message from Commodore Kesnoor saying all serving officers to be in combat uniform, I was looking for my overalls. But then I read this was serving officers to be in combat uniform, so therefore I refrained from wearing my combat uniform, that was my flying overalls, as always. Also, I want to begin by congratulating Admiral Harikumar on his selection as the next Chief of Naval Staff. And mostly I was very pleased to see the picture in his background, where he had all the various helicopters of the Navy. I don't know if you all noticed it, but I noticed it very much. Thank you very much, Admiral, and congratulations once again. Welcome then to technical session 2 of today's seminar, which is titled Past to the Present, Maritime History, Memorials, Museums and Exhibition Spaces. It is an honor to chair this session, and I must begin by thanking the organizers for giving me this opportunity. We have an extremely interesting panel to discuss the subject. Commander Mohan Narayan is a maritime historian. Ms. Batul Raaj Mehta, an architect who has specialized in creating museums. And Bharat Gothoskar reminds me a bit about myself. He studied mechanical engineering and business management, but wanted to be a conservation architect. I studied electrical engineering at IIT Bombay, but wanted to be a pilot. Both of us eventually got what we wanted. He gave up his corporate career to become a heritage evangelist, which he does through his experiential travel firm, KHAKI Travels. The panel is rounded up with the presence of Dr. Rukshana, Nanji, an archaeologist whose main interest is maritime history and archaeology of coastal sites. Before I invite the panelists to make their opening statements, I feel it appropriate to bring out a few facts about the state of maritime museums and memorials in India. Maritime museums are among the Cinderellas of the museums of the world. Nowhere more so than in India and the Indian Ocean region, where they're conspicuous by their absence. Yet, this is a startling double paradox. For the sea has always been of great importance to human affairs, and especially to the lives of the people of India. The low status and skewed distribution of maritime museums is even more of a paradox, for 95% of the merchandising trade in our globalized world moves by sea, and 40% through the Indian Ocean. Consider this. Denmark has a population of 5.5 million, which is approximately 0.4% of our population. There are 23 maritime museums in that country. Yes, you heard that right, 23 maritime museums. Our first officially acknowledged Maritime Heritage Museum is still at the tendering stage at Lothal. Is it because we don't have a long and glorious maritime history that we can be proud of? Or is it the fact that the maritime museums are not in the forefront of anyone's list of cultural must-haves? Not even those who supposedly think saltwater flows in their veins. 99% plus of our population are landlubbers, and what's more, proud to be so. To them, the sea is okay off a beach, from the deck of a cruise liner, or on the other side of the TV screen. Otherwise, it's an alien element, populated, as Dr. Johnson observed, and the scenes he mentioned, by members of a literally outlandish tribe, anxious to risk death by drowning, while living in conditions closely akin to a prison cell. Ships shipbuilding, navigation, the sea and sailors remained for the most part beyond the social and cultural pale. So far so, indeed, that recovering the maritime histories of nations before of non-European societies before any time between before the mid to late 19th century is a significant challenge. Given the maritime community of which any maritime museum is a part, its role is to collect, preserve, and display objects from the past and present maritime life of its society in a way that educates and informs the visitor. In short, the role is to illuminate a given society's corner of maritime history. History. History has had assigned to it the office of judging the past and of instructing the present for the benefit of future ages. Maritime museums may not rise to such high offices, but seek only to show the past as it really was. It may be a sad truth that in most cultures we have sufficient maritime littoral. The place of maritime world is not at top of the table. But if the pun may be forgiven, if matters maritime are often below the salt, they are at least still at the table as an accepted participant at the feast. But that is not true in all cultures, and it's not unfair to say that for most part it is not true in today's mainstream Indian culture. The theme of the session is appropriately past is the present. To help you muse on the importance of the maritime world now, and as it will continue to be for the foreseeable future, it is worth engaging for a moment in what historians call a counterfactual and philosophers a Gendakan experiment. You are in the delicious state of half wakefulness just before it's time to wake up in the morning. You have not yet opened your eyes. Now imagine that at the moment you do finally decide to get moving and open your eyes, suddenly everything that is in your immediate and local world that has spent any part of its product cycle from raw material to usable item on the sea disappears. Now describe your circumstances. I think it's fair to say that what you will be describing is an embarrassed, stark naked human being standing amongst raised mudflats of a vanished city with everything we have and use in our lives today includes in its makeup something that has, at some stage, spent some time on board a ship, being taken from some A to some B, where it is processed into something that constitutes a part of our everyday world. Some two-thirds of the contents of container liners that carry so much of the world's merchandising trade are partially completed goods on their way from some B to some C for additional processing. The chances of anything escaping spending time at sea are accordingly diminished, and hence the importance. There are bright spots, though, and for that we have to thank some of our visionary naval personalities like Admiral Davachi, Admiral Nadkarni for the Maritime Heritage Society, and Admiral Pasricha, the creator of the only submarine museum in Asia and the Naval Aviation Museum at Goa. I would be amiss if I did not mention the redoubtable Commodore Rajan Veer, President Emeritus of IMF, for setting up the Maritime Museum as well as two memorials dedicated to seafarers at Pune. The Maritime Mumbai Museum Society is also another laudable effort. I am extremely happy that a beginning has been made with the proposed National Maritime Heritage Museum at Lothal, of which we shall hear more as we go along. And I fervently hope that all these efforts will go a long way in curing the landlubbers of their sea blindness. I would now like to invite Commander Mohan Narayan to make his opening statement. Commander Mohan Narayan is an alumnus of the National Defence Academy, Pune, and was commissioned into the Indian Navy on the 1st of July, 1978. A communication and electronic warfare specialist, he has held a number of appointments in the Navy. Commander Narayan has had the privilege of being the longest serving curator of the Maritime History Society from 2000 to 2015. In that capacity, he planned, organized, and conducted a myriad of activities of the Society. 18 of the 20 books published by the MHS on India's maritime activities of the Society. were done during his watch. He was part of the team that between 2001 and 2004 set up the Maritime Heritage Exhibition at Mumbai during the first ever International Fleet Review. The restoration of the Bombay Castle, heritage walks of 500-year-old naval dockyard, the Maritime Museum on board the Vikrant, the memorial at Cooperage in honor of Naval Uprising of 1946, and the Ballet Bandar Museum. In 2011, he independently curated the 45-day Maritime Heritage Exhibition at the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Victoria Memorial, involving all major maritime agencies of the country. After relinquishing charge of the MHS in 2015, Commander Narayan remains actively engaged in his pursuit for promotion of maritime history and heritage. It's over to you, Mohan. You are mute, Mohan.
Please let me thank the Western Naval Command, the Indian Maritime Foundation, and the Nautical Institute West for the invitation to be part of this event. It's indeed a privilege. The Maritime History Society, which was in the van of Navy's formal study and dissemination of our maritime history and heritage, came into being by some quirk of fate, or let me put it a little more bluntly, because of an indictment in the media. The Times of India City Lights column of 8th May 1978 castigated the Navy for a ramshackle of a museum in the erstwhile Bombay Castle, today's INS Andre. The article further went to bemoan the fact that there was not a single institution in the city which celebrated its connection to the sea, a connection that not only enriched it, but was its very raison d'etre. And the piece ended with a near plea that somebody ought to do something about it. And that somebody happened to be Admiral Manohar Avati, the then fleet commander of the Navy's Western Fleet. And the something that he set up precisely 5 days after this piece appeared in the newspaper is the Maritime History Society. And one of the first things that this society did was to set up a maritime museum on the middle ground island of the Gateway of India. Now, this museum came up because of the active collaboration and support of every maritime institute in the country, the academia, and the industry. It's a bit unfortunate that the museum had to close down in 2004. I beg your pardon, in 1984. But as long as it stood, it served a purpose and proved a very important point, that it was feasible for maritime professionals of all hues, the academia and the industry to come together on a maritime platform. Those set up by a naval admiral and backed by the Navy, it was always open house at the Maritime History Society. And we had, the only thing the MHS insisted was all its members have matters maritime at heart. And the MHS greatly benefited from this association with people with different walks of life. Commodore Chitnis just told you about the various activities which was taken out by the Navy, in fact, spearheaded by the MHS, whether it be the conservation of the Bombay Castle, the introduction of the Heritage Walk, the setting up of the museum on board the Vikrant, the Naval Memorial at Cooperage in honor of the Naval Uprising of 1946, or the Ballet Bandar Museum, came up because of active participation and cooperation of maritime professionals of all hues, the academia, and the industry. And to my mind, that is the way forward if we have to tackle a museum. Now, before this opening remarks turn out to be a panegyric towards an institution, let me add a word about museums and museology. The very idea of a museum is a Western concept, and the Indian audience has not yet been primed to fully assimilate the concept of a museum. The idea of showcasing, which remains central to a museum, has seen a steady tenor toward the evolution of museology. But what has changed over a period of time is the quality of display, the very idea of an object, and the reaction and the mentality of an audience to a museum. In this age of changing technology, our minds have been conditioned to accept and assimilate rapid doses of information. And in this context, the idea of interacting with a static object seems to be something of an alien concept. In fact, the very idea of object has undergone a change of time, has gone a change of process, and it is much beyond its physical dimensions. And it stands before an audience that is increasingly getting accustomed to interacting with intangible experiences. The object, because of its genuineness and provenance, might attract the viewer. But look at it this way: if you can simulate an experience around the artifact in real-time basis instead of putting it behind the glass case, then what you get is a package and an experience that the viewer will remember long after. History might tend to be didactic, but maritime museums must concentrate on creating experiences. Thank you.
That was a nice introduction. I would now like to introduce our next speaker, next panelist, Ms. Batul Raaj Mehta. Batul?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for introducing.
Batul Raaj Mehta is the founding partner of Batul Raaj Mehta and Associates, a museum and cultural planning firm based out of Mumbai. As one of the foremost museum planners in India, she prioritizes audiences, their engagement with content, with cultural and historical narratives. She has led teams for the Bihar Museum, one of the more modern India's largest museum projects, the Statue of Unity Museum, Gujarat, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Science City, Patna, the Science Gallery, Bengaluru, which is part of the prestigious Science Gallery International Network, the Koba Jain Museum, Gujarat, the Historic Patna Museum, Patna, and the National Maritime Heritage Museum, Lothal. Batul has a degree in architecture from CEPT Ahmedabad and further specializes in heritage management, further specialization in heritage management from the Brandenburg Technical University, Germany. She has worked on heritage, conservation, and museum projects across 7 countries. It's over to you, Batul. We are eager to hear about your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here today as it's part of the Navy Week, and I thank the Western Naval Command for inviting me for this webinar. I'm going to just have a short, quick presentation because, as Sir just mentioned before, we all get excited a lot more with visuals, and if we can think more rather than see somebody's face. So I'm going to just quickly share it, and if anybody can just tell me if you can see this. Yes, thank you.
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Okay, thank you. So maritime museums, as Sir mentioned, and I'm going to talk more about it. But just to give a little bit of background on what we do, because we are not, our firm is not an architectural firm. What we really do is we look at soft powers and how do you make museums really interesting by harnessing those soft powers. Exactly the topic of this webinar. And we look at it in terms of how do we have a museum which functions operationally or in a management jargon efficiently and sustainably, but also how does it get its visitors really excited about what the topics are within it. And again, using a a current, very contemporary management jargon, that we look at storytelling and we look at engagement all through our museums. As Sir has already covered most of the museums I've mentioned and which we have worked on, one of the museums which we are working on now and which is very relevant to this webinar is the National Maritime Heritage Complex, and I'm going to refer to it as NMHC all through the webinar so that it's quicker. So this heritage complex is coming up in Lothal. The architects for it are Hafiz Contractor and Associates. And it's a fairly large site of about 375 acres. And it's less than 2 kilometers away from Lothal, which all of us know as a Harappan site. But very few of us know that it's one of the first known tidal docks of the world. And we all know Harappan civilization as a time where cities were developed, very urban civilization, great water management, sewage systems, and spread across a large area. What we do not know enough is that they were the pioneering seafarer civilization of the world at that time. And some of the technologies, techniques, and the way they use the waterways and the sea is completely amazing and way ahead of what we expected something which is 4,500 years ago to be. This entire museum is focused not just on the Harappan period, but it covers 14 galleries in one part of the complex. And these 14 galleries begin from the Harappan period, but come to contemporary ports of what has happened as entire development of maritime history and heritage across of the last 4,500 years. And one of the largest galleries in this museum is dedicated to the Indian Navy. And we're talking about mythology, different regions, what climate change has done in terms of maritime heritage, and more about these areas. But what kind of stories can maritime museums tell us? And we all know that you can talk about technology and innovation, but there's also about understanding how navigation was undertaken over the period of 4,500 years and how things have changed, and yet so many things have remained the same. While we all know about the technology and the economy part, which is about trade, about power, about changing political boundaries, but a very important aspect is the soft power of this of maritime history and heritage, which is about how new communities have come across and how new townships developed, how cuisines developed, mythologies, shared history and traditions, and also how a lot of cultural memory still continues in the way we have our phrases, we have we coin terms from literature, and how do we put as mentioned earlier, that museums cannot be flat in the sense that can't be just artifacts or just panels any longer. And we know from the last 2 years that everybody is so used to now working and looking at things from the screen. But also the challenges that are there with the screen is that it's never really immersive. And that's something which a museum can provide us. So we look at immersive exhibitions, look at effective use of technology so that you can interact, bring in personal anecdotes and stories, because it's always good to relate to somebody who we can see ourselves in. It's not about just bigger epics and wars and personalities who can be as big as kings and queens, but also look at what an individual or a lay person goes through a certain period. And of course, look at public programming and community collaborations. The previous session, we heard about how important it is about education and application. And if there's a hands-on, minds-on public programming, it's extremely interesting because as the image shows that you can have children learning about things. We heard Sir speak in the earlier session about education of how it's possible to navigate through for children to just understand from their shadow that which direction they're going. Everybody uses their phones today, but that would be a really interesting aspect to learn in a museum. We all know about the fact that there are maritime museums around the world. Some of them are very, very interesting, and they belong to countries which have a much shorter maritime history than ours. But the fact that the storytelling comes across so strongly, whether it's the Merseyside Maritime Museum in Liverpool, where its claim to fame is that that's where the Titanic was constructed. Each country has a maritime history museum, and most of them are interactive. The interactivity and the immersive environments ensure that the soft power sustains beyond reading something or seeing something, because the bombardment of information that all of us are facing, we tend to forget also a lot more. But the moment we do things or we experience things, that remains. And that's the entire aspect that we look at. Now, how do these maritime museums uh, participate in civil society, and what is the outcome of all of that? And we do have a lot of maritime museums in India, but they do not have the central location, or they're not built in tourism itineraries. So Bharat will be talking more about that. But just about what does it do to visit it as a group or as an individual, and participate in what it offers. So in terms of creative thinking, it helps us to connect and understand how we are connected across the world, and yet we are different and same. So it does reinforce identity and community. It makes history very accessible, because all of us are now aware of history channels or YouTube or 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 WhatsApp forwards, which may not necessarily be authentic, but a museum always brings that authenticity. And if we can participate, walk through something, be in a cell of of uh, individual who has gone through a certain journey, we understand the scale, what it means to spend 3 months at sea, and of course, it helps preserve heritage. But all of this also leads to an application outside the museum, where it sustains and stimulates the knowledge economy. The lateral thinking definitely helps in cognitive behavior and cognitive application. uh, there is a multiplier effect on tourism and craft sector, and we've seen cities around the world transforming, but even cities in India, uh, with our experience of the Bihar Museum and what it has done in the last 10 years to Patna, especially in terms of hotel rooms, restaurants, people coming and spending an extra night to be in Patna. We're seeing that multiplier effect. And then it forms a global community of lots of collaborations, and lots of soft collaborations, which need not necessarily be at a level of government or diplomatic collaborations, but also in terms of communities, and whether it's online communities, whether it's Instagram communities, all of that comes together, and it leads to a very meaningful exchange. It's got its pros and cons, but it still allows one to be aware of every other aspect of it. And thank you very much, and I'm going to hand it back to Commodore Chitnis.
Thank you, Batul. Thank you for enlightening all of us on what is happening. We'll come back to you a little later. But now I have Bharat Gothoskar, who, as I said earlier, studied mechanical engineering and business management, but actually wanted to be a conservation architect. The city's history, I presume it's Mumbai's history and heritage, has been an abiding interest in him since childhood. And that made him give up 16 years career in sales and marketing with corporate houses like Godrej, Pidilite, and Mahindra to pursue his passion of heritage evangelism through his experiential travel. KHAKI Tours was founded by him in 2015 to create awareness about Mumbai's history and heritage in a fun and interesting manner. In 2018, the KHAKI Heritage Foundation, KHF, was formed with the objectives of conservation, archiving, and generating awareness about heritage in Mumbai and beyond. One of the foundation's initiatives is the KHAKI Lab, a multi-purpose cultural space dedicated to the city of Mumbai. Let's hear more about this from Bharat. So over to you, Bharat.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible.
Yes,
Yeah, great.
and visible
Yeah.
too.
Thank you, Commodore. It is such an honor to be invited for this initiative because technically speaking, I don't have any qualifications to speak here, right? So, but I am going to talk about how I am making a difference about things, right? And the word KHAKI stands for Keeping Heritage Alive and Kicking in India. And why did we choose a name like this? I'll speak about slightly later. But in the last 7 years that we have existed, we have been able to generate interest in Mumbai's heritage amongst visitors as well as locals. So I always used to feel that whenever I would attend talks at Asiatic or any other venue, the gray hair overpowered the black hair, and there's nothing against age uh, that people have. I just feel that younger people are not being attracted enough to history, heritage, culture, and you have to make it, if I may use the word, you have to make it a bit cool for people to be interested in these things. Um, One of the lines that I loved was by Charles Mingus, who was a famous musician. That what is creativity? He said, creativity is when you make simple things complex, it is commonplace. But when you make complex things simple for people to understand, that is creativity. And hence, we are in the initiative of making history heritage simple for people in bite-sized format. Today everything is about Twitter, Instagram. People's attention spans are lower, right? If you have to make, I mean, government has all this initiative of making Hindi as a language popular, but I think so Bollywood has contributed more for awareness of Hindi than government has done, and that's all because of soft power. That is what exactly we are discussing today. So probably when I was much younger, there were serials like Fauji or a movie like Top Gun that would have attracted people of my generation to join the armed forces. So how do you make it cool? I think maritime tourism, and I'm using the word at a far wider area, not just from a naval perspective, but all aspects of how do we interact with the sea, has a huge potential in India in general and Mumbai in particular. I don't think so. We are even scratching on the surface of the potential that this tourism has and the impact that it would have. When I did my MBA, I passed out in the year 2000. My final year project was about heritage marketing, which essentially means that heritage has to generate money to maintain itself. Government doesn't have enough money to conserve everything which is there, and tourism is something that will pay for the upkeep. But the problem at most of the places in India is mismatch between hardware and software. Hardware, as I say, static museums, buildings, things that you can see. Software is somebody making it experiential. And I love the way Batul presented that they are not looking at just as a traditional museum, the way museums used to be in the past. Now museums are totally different. They have to be more interactive. They have to be out in the open where people can interact. So interaction is something that is very, very critical, which is there. Let's not look at this only from the point of view of history, what is happening today. So when you talk of maritime tourism, we have to look at nature. We have to look at people's interaction with the sea. So the fisher folk, I mean, in Mumbai, people keep on talking about the fact that coolies are the first people of this city. But where can you interact with coolies? Where can you understand their culture, history, tradition, how they fish, what are the celebrations that they have? There's nothing in the city which tells you, right? So all this is part of that. So whether it is the sea or coast, island forts or coastal forts, lighthouses, coral reefs, there is so much which is there, which we need to take out to the people. And I feel Mumbai's harbor has the potential that is really, really huge. And, whether it's the Oyster Rock, the Middle Ground Battery, Cross Island, there is so much. And, at the expense of sounding very, overstepping my brief, I would love to see someday that the Bombay dockyard and the Bombay castle becomes the largest naval interpretation center. I wouldn't use the word park or amusement park, but it has to be much more than what it is, as a dedicated place where we will inspire generations of Indians as well as people coming from abroad to show greater respect, better understanding of what the Navy has to do for India. And when I say this, it is, when I say experiential tourism here, it doesn't only mean about having static stuff. I'm looking at walks, sailing tours, enactments. There are multiple places. I was in a castle called Warwick Castle in UK, where every day, twice a day, they have a war where two sides come fight. There are cannons blasted. I mean, why can't we recreate the Dutch attack on this city, or the way the Siddhis attacked this city, or the Marathas attack? So whatever interaction which is there. I mean, I feel bad that when I go to Hong Kong, I see Chinese sampans, and when I go to Dubai, I see Arab doors. But why can't we see locally made wooden ships which will recreate the grandeur of what local shipping was about, right? And the interaction, the making it simple and making it cool. And also, I feel we have to rope in influencers for something like this. And as we chat along, we'll do that. Of course, people like Commander Mohan Narayan always guide us in terms of getting the right information that we need to know about that. And I hope more and more people from the Navy keep on guiding people like us, who then interpret, make it simple for the masses to appreciate. So with that, my introductory comments are over, and I'll hand it over to Commodore Chitnis. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. We'll come back to you with many questions. But right now, we invite Dr. Rukshana Nanji, who is a double postgraduate and has a doctorate in archaeology. She has worked at several excavations in Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Karnataka. She has authored 2 books and numerous papers in edited volumes and academic journals, and has presented her work extensively at conferences and seminars in India and abroad. Her main area of study is the maritime history and archaeology of coastal sites, with special interests in early medieval period. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rukshana, and it's over to you for your introductory remarks.
Good morning, everyone. And before I start, I should thank the organizers for thinking of me and including me in such an august panel. I hope I can bring something to the table that hasn't been said before, because almost everyone has covered everything I need to say. Let me start by saying that my interest in the maritime aspect of archaeology started, almost instantly that I joined up to do my master's in archaeology at the Deccan College. I was lucky to go to Kuntasi and work with Professor Dhavlikar, one of the most eminent Harappan archaeologists at the time. And Kuntasi being a center, a Harappan center for maritime trade, opened up a whole different aspect of archaeology for me. Because here we were talking about ships leaving perhaps from this little Gujarat port town and sailing all the way across to the Middle East, to West Asia. And the very fact that we were looking at anchor stones, we were looking at beads, we were looking at shells and worked shells, suddenly opened up this whole possibility that there is a world out there which very few archaeologists at the time were really looking at. The first thing that I'd like to say is that maritime archaeology in India is relatively young. And I heard people use terms like sea blindness. I could not agree more. We as a nation are more tuned towards looking at the Himalayas and landlocked histories. All our narratives, our epics are almost all land-based. And unless you are living on the coast or you belong to a coastal community, very, very few people actually bother to look at the sea or decide to work in it. More so when I started working on the early medieval period in archaeology. And I discovered that up to the early 2000s, almost nobody was working in medieval history. Everyone thought that medieval history started with the Mughals. So here was a whole rich body of work, and no one was looking at it. When we look at archaeological sites, and we have thousands of archaeological sites to look at along the coasts of India, it's amazing that the quantity of work is so little. You look at other countries and you have them claiming a kind of ownership of the ocean, which in India, surprisingly, although we have a whole ocean named after us, we still don't give it the importance that we need to. The first thing that we need to do is to acknowledge that we are a power in the ocean, and that will come when we take pride in the history of our archaeological sites on the coast. Some of these sites face really large, very, in-your-face kind of problems. Erosion, human degradation of the sites, human activity, etc. But all of these can be handled if there is a little more awareness. It's very heartening to know that in the last few decades, there has been an interest in maritime history, and yet there's so much that needs to be done. The first thing is that we need to look at these sites not just as sites where people from other littoral countries or from other parts of the Indian Ocean or from across the world have simply been coming, and we have been the hosts who have simply been receiving them. We have to look at ourselves as people who have also taken the initiative to sail out. You do have records of Indians who have sailed to Southeast Asia or to West Asia or even to the Mediterranean. And yet we don't do anything about it. We have not been able to tap into this. It's wonderful to hear that the museum at Lothal is going to include everything that you could possibly want. And the other panelists spoke about harnessing this power at a very early age. And I think the phrase, if I can be excused to borrow from a marketing phrase, is catch them young. Our school textbooks, our history lessons need to include at least some interesting aspects of maritime history. It doesn't have to be a completely separate subject or a completely separate, a field of study. Children are burdened with it as it is. But it is possible. We can include it. We can make it far more interactive and interesting. Let me give you an example. I have a friend, a fellow archaeologist who's a prehistorian, lives in Chennai, and has her own little trust, a small museum, and an interactive museum for children where children go spend the day at the museum, interact with craftsmen and people. They simulate an entire excavation and get the children to actually work hands-on on an archaeological excavation. It is an amazing experience for the child because they are never going to forget this. I'm sure this can be done at several other places. And I do hope that some of the museums that are being developed now will include some of these aspects. But we need more research as well. We need higher research, and we need research, particularly underwater research. We have almost no shipwrecks. We have no effort made to harness the living communities at some of these archaeological sites, which may still be carrying on the traditions from the past. Let me give you an example. At Mandvi, you have a shipbuilding yard, and you have these beautiful dhows being constructed in wood. And yet you don't hear of too many people being able to sail on a dhow from Mandvi, although Kutch tourism is doing very well. You have the songs of the sea and the seafarers. If you hear the malams and you hear the shipbuilders sing their traditional songs, particularly as I was lucky enough to experience on a full moon night on the beach at Mandvi, trust me, you will come away fascinated. And yet, these are the things that we almost never look at. So I believe that along with the archaeology of site, you need to be looking at the ethnography. You need to be including all these people. So not only are you giving them a livelihood, you're encouraging a certain pride in a heritage, which along the way is going to really hold us in good stead. If we want to attract younger people to maritime studies, I think that's where you start. And I think the romance of archaeology and the romance of folklore, the romance of the sea, is what you need to bring into it before you thrust hardcore, very, very serious scientific research upon them. To give you an example, you have the stories of Sinbad, and you have the stories of pirates, and you have all these stories which have always fascinated us as children. Certainly, a lot of it is fantasy. We all know that. But if we can tap into that imaginative interest with children, not about fictitious stories, but about real-time people, about how they sail, how they read the stars, how they used to read the stars and navigate, how they sailed despite the harshest conditions through storms and seas. I'm sure you're going to be able to catch many more young people and get the interest that we want. And at some point of time, perhaps we will look at the sea with a certain amount of pride and then claim it. We have had experiences like this when we were working at sites like Sanjan or at Padri in Gujarat, or even at Kuntasi again, where local people, once they knew their own historical backgrounds, they were so fascinated that there were children who were very, very keen to learn more and follow this up even at a higher level. Trying to choose that as a career, asking us how they could go about it. And I think that is the kind of interest we need to generate, and we need to generate it across the board everywhere in the country. I think I will leave the discussion at this point and hope that we will interact a little more as we proceed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rukshana. I was very pleased to hear from you that you studied your master at the Deccan College in Pune. And you might know then that the Deccan College Archaeology department was the site where we set up the Maritime Museum of the Indian Maritime Foundation initially.
Correct.
Of course, we've had to leave that place, and now we've set it up at the Anantara Pawar College of Engineering, Pune. But so that makes a connect between IMF and so I'm recruiting you also to become a member of IMF. Thank you. Bharat, very nice point about experiential tourism and Bombay Castle and the Bombay Barracks becoming centers of naval interpretation. Actually, Commander Mohan Narayan, was wholly and solely responsible for this heritage walk starting. After that, we had the sound and light show at the Bombay Castle. If you remember, Mohan, during
Yes,
the IF, it was a very interesting event. And, you said the two people warring against each other, and that thing was being shown. This was presented in the Light and Sound show. I don't know why it died a natural death at some point of time, but I wish we could revive these kind of things. And so we need to really look at this. So, Mohan, can you add a little more as to where we lost out in the sound and light show and the heritage walks, etc.? Are they still continuing, or are we going to revive them, or are there any plans like that?
Yes, sir. This sound and light show has a very interesting history to it. In February 2001, we had that International Fleet Review, And that is the time we said we have to restore the Bombay Castle and introduce the Heritage Walk. The Navy, of course, had no expertise in making a movie. So we started going to trade, and they said, it's going to cost you 10 lakhs to make a movie. Now, 10 lakhs was quite an amount in 2001. So we made that movie in-house, and it was about a 3-minute video clip after the restoration of the castle. And that video is still there with the MHS. Somehow, to my mind, it should have been made more popular and put on YouTube. So what we actually did was the Bombay Castle telling its own story. And most people don't realize that it's the Bombay Castle where the history of modern Bombay actually began. The Bombay Castle and the Bombay Dockyard. It should have been made popular, but I suppose in 2001 we were babes in the woods when it came to marketing ourselves. Because if you look at these two things which Comrade Chitnis said, the Bombay Dockyard and the Bombay Castle, if these two institutions were to tell their own story in their own words, they could very justifiably say, Coram Pars Magna Fui, which is Latin for we too played a great part. Because the castle and the Bombay Dockyard is where the plans of Bombay were made by Gerard Angier and the English East India Company. Yes, we should have put it away. We should have put it, circulated it more amongst various people, but we lost out. The Dockyard Walk, when we started in 2001, it was hugely popular. Somehow, after 2008, there was, after what happened in 2008, there was a problem to have it open, and it was closed on because of security reasons. The issue is what is part of heritage is also still very much in use. So it becomes a tight rope to open it. But yes, I believe there are plans afoot to keep it and to make it, to revive it. And I think that will be a great gesture by the Navy, if they can do it. But yes, of course, there are security considerations. I know I will be speaking out of turn that it should be introduced.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's keep our fingers crossed that such a thing actually happens. But Batul, while you were speaking, and after that Bharat was speaking, there was something flashed on the screen. It says we should try and co-locate water sport activities or some such activities with the museum so that the museum get more popular. First of all, we've chosen Lothal as the site. Well, Lothal has got history of 2,500 years, but say that how will we be able to attract people there is a question. Because I myself have been to Lothal along with Commodore Rajan Veer. We went there. We were researching some material for another book being written by someone in UK. So we found it pretty difficult to get there, first of all. And then when we went there and we saw the Lothal, supposed to be UNESCO heritage site, it was a real disappointment. So how are you planning to attract people to Lothal? I mean, are there any other associated things? I mean, I see the very fancy concept of the museum, etc. Are there any plans to that?
So the site actually is a 365 acres, and the museum is just one part of it. As the name says, it's National Maritime Heritage Complex. So the museum is one part of it. It has an amusement park which is themed around understanding not water sports, but about what is the experience of being in water, and it will be an amusement section. There are various other tourism components to the site also. The site is about 2 kilometers away from Lothal, so it's not exactly at the heritage site, but there will be a way of just going to the heritage site if you want. But there is enough attraction for people to spend a full day, including hotels which are coming up there. So it's a very integrated approach, and as Rukshana had mentioned, that it looks maritime heritage is not just about the physical aspect of it, but also like whether it's the Malam singers or literature of that period. So a lot of that, it's being planned to bring that alive, so that it can become a one-stop destination for somebody who wants to get an introduction to what maritime heritage is, but it's also in an entertaining and a very engaging manner. While uh, the current situation of Lothal is that it's not easily accessible, but by road it's just about 1.5 to 2 hours from Ahmedabad, Baroda, Mehsana, all these places. So once it's a full day destination, and there's a lot more to do where you learn things by becoming involved, by experience, by recreations. There are sections which are going to recreate different locations, sites, and also in terms of the actual seafaring vehicles, parts of that are going to be recreated. So it will be quite a wow attraction in many ways. But also there are things to do for people who do not want to get into a very conventional museum setup, because this museum is not going to be a museum which will have static displays or just panels, but it is going to be an interactive museum. But even if that is something which people do not want to spend time, there are sound and light shows that are being planned around it. There are IMAX kind of theaters. So it's going to be everything is themed around maritime heritage and the soft power related to it, whether it's the cultural, whether it's the food culture, whether it's the crafts, shipbuilding, all of those aspects. So there is something for everybody in that and for all the age groups.
Thank you very much, because it puts a lot of things in perspective there, because it's not only a museum, as you said, it's a whole complex of, and it has all the infrastructure that is going to be associated with it. That is what actually Bharat was saying, that we need to make it cool, right, for people to go there, and that's a very good idea, I think, and Rukshana, you were talking about, if I may call you all by your first name, I think I'm all of you.
Please, absolutely.
There's a lot of gray up here, so I can say that. School children, etc., to involve them, you got to involve them in everything. Like at the IMF, we partner with a concern in the US called the Ocean Conservancy. They do coastal cleanup, and we involve children. Of course, there's no sea or ocean in Pune, but we do it at Mumbai. And in Pune, we clean up the river banks of the Mula and Mutha. And now we've taken it one step further. The person who's looking after it, Commodore Malhotra, he's taken coastal cleanup to the river banks of Punjab. He goes and does it on the Beas and the Satluj and all these rivers over there. So, that's how we're involving children. So you step by step, you have to keep involving children, like you said, and I'm sure, Bharat, you got some points on this, how to make it cool for the children. I mean, how are you going to attract really young people who are black in their head,
No, so I feel it's very easy to attract children. The most difficult segment, and I'm using the word segment because I'm a marketer, the most difficult segment to attract is young adults between the age of 25 and 15. So 15 to 25, that's the age bracket which is the most difficult to attract to anything which is cultural, which is about history. And I think so. Our experience in the past 7 years shows that you have to make things which attract them. So one of our most popular walks that we do is called Grizzly Girgaon, which is a ghost walk which happens at the night. It starts at 11 o'clock and ends at 1 o'clock. And that has attracted maximum number of young adults. And once they attended, they realized that heritage walks is not something that is boring, that just talks about architecture or, which is very PowerPoint presentation like this. This is something interesting. Then they started coming for other things. So I love the way Batul has planned this museum, because what happens is, if a family is coming, if one person is interested in heritage and other people are not, there are other entertaining things which will then push those people towards taking interest in that history, heritage, culture, whatever is to be projected. And it has to be wholesome. So I was in a city which is called Malacca in Malaysia, and the way they have conserved everything, yet there is something for everybody, a young adult, a child, elderly couples, everybody had something to do in that place and spend an entire day. So that's the way we should look at it, that if somebody comes tomorrow to Bombay Castle and the dockyard, how can they spend an entire day where they will be engaged, young children, everybody, every set of people. And I feel Mohanji mentioned about how he used the film. Now, I believe getting people involved who can make a difference and communicate to a wider section is very, very important. I think so. The Korean government is doing amazing amount of work to use soft power of Korea by making what is called K-pop and K-drama cool with a lot of young adults across the world. And that's why even my daughter, like, she knows all the details of what is happening in Korea as compared to what she knows probably in her own country. Now, that is something that we have to incentivize, of involving other people who can make a difference. And if there are influencers like Commander Mohan Narayan, how can we help him to reach out to a wider section of society so that people start appreciating what is there? There is this book called Ocean of Churn, right? And the way the author has written it, it opened up eyes of a lot of people who looked at maritime traditions of Indian Ocean beyond the colonial perspective, the way it is. And this is something that is important for us to do, because if we are only going to come up with white papers and serious articles, which are important. So role of somebody like Rukshana is very, very important, but role of some others, what she does to take it to a wider section and in a more palatable way, is something that, so both sections of society have to work together. I always feel that movies like Mughal-e-Azam or Bajirao Mastani did more to generate interest in those eras than what any history book would have done. So that is important. How do you use pop culture to make information easy for people to understand? I just want to talk about one more point, which Commander Mohan Narayan and all of you were mentioning, that something was started at Bombay Castle and then it didn't sustain. What happens is, when one particular official is very enthusiastic about heritage, something starts, but sensitization of the entire organization is something very important. We currently curate walks inside the BMC headquarters, but what is important is to sensitize even the person who is the sweeper there, that why this is important. And once you do that, then it becomes sustainable for the organization to do. We do a lot of free walks for BMC employees, including the sweepers, to make them realize what is heritage in that area. And this is something that is important. We sadly, heritage in India is a very elitist kind of initiative. We have to take it to the masses, and that's where I feel the platform like KHAKI can take it to masses. Everybody can be a volunteer who is here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. Thank you very much. I just saw a question or a flash from Mrs. Lalita Ramdas, and if it is the same Mrs. Lalita Ramdas that I know, wife of Admiral Ramdas. Thank you very much for your comment, ma'am. And I agree with you. I mean, we got to popularize the place. We do not need to have a small series or number of small museum spaces, etc. But the Lothal concept is something different. And as Batul said, it's going to be, it will popularize the place itself. It will popularize Lothal, because Lothal is a very important site in the Indian context. And so to have a museum there is also a very good idea. Nevertheless, your suggestion is also very good, Mrs. Ramdas. Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Rukshana, I would like to ask you as to, what kind of sites are you looking at for the future? I mean, I know there's a lot of excavation going on, underwater excavation for the lost Dwarka city, etc. And where are we at that stage now? Where is Dwarka? Has finally been
Dwarka
looked at?
has,
Dwarka?
I have not been really working at Dwarka, so I am not an authority on the site. But I can tell you that Dwarka has been studied for since Dr. S.R. Rao and even before. I mean, number of archaeologists have been working both on land as well as underwater excavations have taken place over there. The final word, of course, has still to come out on it, because there are the material is still under study. So really, it wouldn't be fair for me to speak about that. But I think in the last maybe 15 years, 15 to 20 years, there has been an increased awareness that we have to look beyond just Harappan sites and Harappan cities in India and start looking at other aspects of our history as well. So a great deal of interest is being generated on the time period that so far had been completely neglected, which was the early medieval period from approximately the 6th, 7th century up to about the 13th century. And this is particularly true when we are talking about maritime archaeology. All the time, in the past, we've had the focus being on land archaeology and on the Harappan. And in Indian archaeology, I think we've needed to compensate for the loss of Harappan sites that went to Pakistan during the partition. So we have expended a very large amount of our time and effort in looking at Harappan sites on our own soil, and justifiably so, because we have a wonderful array of sites in India. But in the last 20 years, it's very heartening to know that what were very dark, unknown periods of history, which had not been studied, those are the sites that are now being looked at very, very carefully, and with a great deal of interest from the international community as well. So sites along both the west and the east coast, maritime sites which are showing you contacts with both West Asia at the one end and Southeast Asia all the way up to China on the other side. So this covers almost the entire part of the Indian Ocean, and sites are now being looked at as much more than just archaeological sites. As Bharat said, it's great that we are going there and digging it up, but it's not just to dig up and write in specialized books that barely 3.5 people are going to read. The idea is to take it to the public, and more people are now becoming aware that it's not just what you're digging up, but it's also how you are now going to make it known to the public in a far more palatable form than just a dry, boring textbook. So that's happening. I can give you one example. You have a program called the Return to Roots program that was started by an international group of expatriate Parsis who are living abroad. And this is, I mean, I don't mean to be community based in this conversation, but just that the program is very interesting. These are expatriates who are, sending youngsters in the same age group that Bharat was talking about, 15 to about 25, 30. A group of about 10 or 15 from across the world are brought to India and taken through a cultural circuit in Gujarat and Bombay. And I have been working with them, not working really, I have been consulting with them. So I take them on a short trip down to Sanjan, which is the place where the Parsis first arrived, supposedly. And I actually take them to the site that was excavated, although there's almost nothing to see there. Just taking them to the site and explaining what they are looking at. It is an amazing eye-opener for all of them. So if that kind of work that we are doing can be brought to the public, I think it is an amazing thing, and I think it can be done across the board everywhere.
Thank you for that very interesting point. Oh, I didn't silence my phone. Anyway, these things happen always when you don't want them to happen. And it just broke my chain of thought, actually. But, what I wanted to say is that we are all talking about museums now. And another thing that we were supposed to talk about is memorials.
Yes.
Memorials is something that we really, lack. And that shows our total disrespect to our forefathers, forebears, etc. Because memorials help commemorate that. The National War Memorial has just been inaugurated about a year and a half back, or maybe 2 years back in Delhi. It's a very fancy-looking memorial that has been built, and it's glad that this government is doing something about it. But similarly, for the seafarers, I mean, it's a person like Commodore Rajan Veer who thought of a memorial, and it was a very simple memorial that he made first. It is just an anchor that belonged to one of his old ships, INS Kuthar, which he managed to procure from the Navy, and put it in the middle of an island at Pune. It's a pretty busy island, and that is called a Seafarers Memorial. It is in memory of all the people who lost their lives at sea. Fishermen, merchants, Navy, Coast Guard, etc., etc. It's called the Seafarers Memorial. And that was inaugurated by Admiral Arun Prakash some years ago, many years ago. And thereafter, he thought of this war memorial for seamen. Many of us don't know that about 7,982 seamen lost their lives in the 2 world wars. And they were sailing on board Allied merchant ships. So this this war memorial is built at the Bund Garden of Pune. And we lay a wreath there every year. Of course, for the last 2 years, we haven't been able to do it because that Bund Garden itself has been taken over by the metro construction. The metro is being constructed over there, and so we can't access that place. But we will revive it soon. So I really feel the need for making these memorials more. So are any of you all in any way, involved with memorials? I mean, Batul, have you been contracted for this? Because you've done these projects overseas, but have you been approached for anything like that in India? You're mute.
Unfortunately, not as yet. We hope that it can be done. And even in terms of memorials, I think what Bharat and what Rukshana has spoken about, it's about bringing that history alive. So a memorial can be an interpretation center, but that storytelling aspect, like Rukshana just talking about taking youngsters to Sanjan and telling the story of Sanjan, even if there is nothing existing. I think that if that can come through in a memorial, it will be a beautiful piece of architecture where you can walk through and there can be some kind of a performance, some kind of a sound and light show. But the human connection which can come through by telling personal stories or having somebody like KHAKI Tours talking about it, I think that is what makes a memorial alive and brings that history and heritage alive for a visitor. And I would look at that aspect coming through whenever there is a memorial and whenever we can work on one. But I think there is lots happening just now. So I would hope that these aspects are also brought in, of living history, of a live connection, of personal stories, where it's much more relatable than talking about somebody who you anyways have already put up on a pedestal.
I agree with you totally. I mean, you got to have memorial. I mean, you got to have physical building, but some kind of a memorial. But along with that, there should be, like in Pune, you have the National War Memorial of the Southern Command, which has a beautiful exhibition center on one side. Then they have a display of tanks. They have an aircraft over there. They have got a ship model. So anyone going there, is seeing all these things which are there to see, and that it attracts more than memorial. Memorial, of course, is a place where people go and lay their wreath, etc. But they should not be neglected, I mean, and I think that we need to create more such memorials at various places,
Absolutely, absolutely. So,
Maritime memorials are almost non-existent. I mean, we had to make a memorial in Pune. Mumbai has got a so-called maritime memorial, but it is, tucked away in one corner of Kulava, where most people don't even know where it is, unless you really look for it. What do you say, Mohan?
Yes, I will tend to agree with you. But, if you ask Mumbaikars about memorials, most of them will not know there are only 3 memorials in the city. I mean, 3 that I know of. There are a couple of more ones. The Naval Uprising Memorial, which the Navy set up in 2001. Now, the Naval Uprising, or what you call the Royal Indian Navy Mutiny, without going into the politics of it, we'll stay away from politics. But it was one of the factors that actually acted as a catalyst for the freedom movement. And we just celebrated 75 years of it. I don't think many people are even aware that a mutiny had taken place in Bombay, started off in Bombay, became a pan-Indian mutiny, and it is in the heart of Colaba at Cooperage. Older than that, there is a memorial at Masjid, a memorial for seafarers, which go back to 1932, and it's just been restored by Vikas Dilawari, and it's a tribute to seafarers who lost their lives in the First World War, and later on they added to all seamen, whether they were serving on merchant ships or they were serving on warships. That's the memorial there, and what happens is only once a year on National Maritime Day, 5th of April, is where some sort of a ceremony is held there with the DG shipping and people from the mercantile marine coming. There's a memorial right at Balakpur, which is for all personnel of the port trust who lost their lives in World War I. Now, 3 memorials, not many people are aware that these memorials even exist. And that's a pity, because they are in the heart of the city. It's not in some, in a distant corner of the city. But yes, have we done something about it to popularize it? I'm afraid I must admit no. Because when we set up the Naval Uprising Memorial in 2002, it was visited by many people across the city. After that, it has died its natural death, and not many people are even aware that such a memorial exists. Now, like you were talking about a sound and light show, it's a right place to set up a memorial. To set up a sound and light show. It belongs to the Navy, but it is accessible to everybody around the clock. Similarly, the Seamen's Memorial at Masjid, or the memorial at Bharat Bandar. Now, there are plans afoot to make a maritime museum in the Bombay Port Trust area, and there is the time ball which is there, which is in quite a dilapidated state. Now, that's an ideal place to put up a memorial, because memorial already exists there for all those people who lost their lives in the infamous Bombay dock explosion. But not many people are aware because it's not accessible to the common man. But yes, Comrade Chitnis, you made a very relevant point that unless you popularize it and sensitize people, like what Bharat said, then only these memorials can be more meaningful. But memorials do exist in Bombay. Thank you.
You want to add to that, Bharat?
So I just want to give an example. We took a trip to Turkey, and we took people especially to Gallipoli, one of the earliest times when Indians participated in a war in Europe. And around that time, there was celebrations which are called the Anzac Day. And the amount of young people who came from Australia and New Zealand to celebrate their ancestors participating, the local guide said, this is the first time some Indian group is coming to see this. He has never seen an Indian group coming. We got a wreath, we laid it at the memorial. The memorials were spectacular. The kind of impression that it had on people who visited the various locations where the cemeteries were immaculately maintained. I mean, Commonwealth's Grave Commission maintains it even in India, which are beautifully maintained. But the whole thing is, it's about, there is a Italian war memorial, prisoners of war in Chiudi, the cemetery, where Italians come and lay wreaths. But there are Indian cemeteries which are in Italy, where no Indians who go there. I was speaking to one of the travel operators who is one of the largest in India, that so many of your people you take, why can't you just take them to see one of these places which will inspire them that Indians have made a difference in Europe? But we are only interested in seeing Eiffel Tower, and we are not seeing beyond, and what is our connect with some foreign land and vice versa. So that is something that is important. Again, people like Batul can contribute towards making this more interactive and not a static memorial the way traditionally it used to happen. And Commander Mohan Narayan mentioned about the museum which is planned in Mumbai. So I'm a member of the society, which is Maritime Mumbai Museum Society, and they have been allocated a space within the Portress lands where they will be coming up with a lovely museum soon. And I think so they are planning to make a very, very interactive museum, which I'm looking forward to. So that would be a great space. But of course, there's another memorial dedicated to people who participated in World War I and II, who are Parsis, which is there at Kharegat Colony. And people staying in the locality also are not aware about it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Kaustubh Gosavi is asking, could upcoming Shivaji statue in Mumbai Seas include a small gallery for the Maratha Armada and Admiral Kanoji Angre? I couldn't agree more with you, Kaustubh, but you all are in the say of things. We are slightly outside the realm of that. But what is the Navy doing about this? Doesn't the Navy have any part to play in this museum? I mean, I'm not asking you for an official opinion, but maybe you can add some of your views to it at some point of time. But what do you think? I mean, any of the panelists, can you say that that Shivaji Memorial could be used for something else beyond just Shivaji statue, like the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel statue at Kevadia? I mean, it has got many things around it. So can we develop that? Bharat, do you feel that you can do something about it?
Yeah, so I always believe that whatever memorials are coming, I mean, there's a memorial coming up for Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, about Chhatrapati Shivaji, they should be beyond statues. And I think so the Sardar Patel statue, which is created in Gujarat, is a great template because they have created an amusement park nearby. There's a butterfly garden, there is interaction, there is so much more that local communities are benefited. We should look at it not only from symbolism, but also how that is going to, there should be a great study of how it is going to help the local economy. And I remember Rukshana giving a presentation in Kama Institute, where she talked about different communities which came. If we are able to involve the different communities which are based at a local level, their history, their legacy woven into the kind of experience which is going to be there, it would be fabulous. I mean, just imagine having a Jewish museum which is at Alibag and a Parsi museum which is at Sanjan, and at Shekhadi there would be a museum which is dedicated to Kokli Muslims. Involve those communities because they will become propagators of what is about the rich legacy which is there. Instead of looking at it from a very narrow prism, you have to look at it at multiple levels. And of course, nature, mangroves, mangrove interpretation centers should also be part of this. We shouldn't just look at it from history point of view. Nature should be a very important part. Shipwrecks are something that India should be looking at. Places like Angria Bank, I think so there is some issue going on that it is not accessible now. But these are places which will make a huge amount of difference in attracting people and making them more. I mean, so how many Mumbaikars actually interact with the sea, right? The whole Eastern Front is not open to us. So it is very important that visitors as well as the locals have more access to the sea and use it more actively.
Thank you, Bharat.
So may I add something to this?
I wanted to ask you, Mohan, I'm going to come to you in any case. These, as you said rightly, that after 2008, security considerations have, prevented people from going into the dockyard, etc. And rightly so. I mean, they are very sensitive areas. But what I'm saying is that, like they've made nowadays, you see virtual tours of ships on the Navy, on the Navy channel. You can see INS Vikramaditya virtually. So to start with, why don't we start, coming up with these kind of virtual tours of the dockyard, virtual tours of the Bombay Castle, etc., without going into any sensitive information, as and when security situations improve, or we can ensure tighter security for people to go inside the dockyard to do the heritage walk, etc. We can go on. But what work you had done that time, can it be converted into a virtual tour kind of a thing?
Yes, of course, it can be done, because not many people are aware about the importance of the Bombay dockyard, because there are a couple of infrastructure there that has been in the same, nothing much has been done to it to let it fall into disuse, but they could be used, and maybe what you said, make a video, or have a virtual program, a virtual tour, which the technology does exist now. But where I wanted to come in, sir, was there are plans afoot, as I understand, that the Kandheri Island, of course now renamed as the Kanoji Angre Island, is going to be used as a tourist spot. Now, many people might not be aware that it was a masterstroke of Shivaji to occupy Kandheri Island, and it acted as a choke point for his fight against the English East India Company. Now, Kandheri Island was totally Shivaji's brainchild, and that's a right place for a memorial to come up on, a Shivaji memorial to come up, because that is where Shivaji showed his maritime strategy. Now, when you have something on Kandheri Island, there are many things which will come up simultaneously, because the access to it is by boat, which means you have boats which ply from Gateway or from the ferry wharf, which is going to be the new domestic terminal, which goes right up to Kandheri Island, which means you see the entire dock vista, the entire, the Mock Manhattan skyline of Bombay. You see all the lighthouses, and then you spend a day on Kandheri and end with a sound and light show on the Maratha Navy, or on maritime history. That's the right place to have it, because you are going to popularize that place, which is now hardly being visited upon, and it's got its own history. So yes, so that's what I wanted to come in about the Kanoji Angre Island, or the statue of Shivaji. But yes, sir, you're absolutely right. The Bombay Castle and the Bombay dockyard, we have the technology now to conduct a virtual tour and let people be aware that what lies behind those walls which separate the city from the dockyard.
Thank you very much, Mohan. And before I thank all my panelists, etc., there are some people in the audience whom I wish to acknowledge, who have been posting very interesting messages here. And I don't know how to communicate with them, but there is a lady, Priyanka, who says that lighthouses are very interesting places. We could make them into interpretation centers. I want to ask her, how many lighthouses has she visited? I mean, they're perfectly nice places to go to, I assure you, and it's very interesting to see the lighthouse working in itself. People should be taken in tours to the lighthouse to see what a lighthouse is, what it does, how it works, etc., etc. Then there is Adil Desai. I want to acknowledge his comments. I mean, he's been making very, very sound suggestions, and I thank you very much for your suggestions, Adil. And we are 5 minutes away from the next session, so all it remains for me to do is to thank my panelists personally. Thank you, Commander Mohan Narayan. Thank you, Batul. Thank you, Bharat, and thank you, Dr. Rukshana. It was wonderful interaction with you.
10 minutes only.
And
Thank you very much.
It's 5 minutes early.
We are going to be meetings virtually. We have met, but I hope we do convert this virtual meeting into a physical meeting sometime. Maybe next year we'll have a seminar, not a webinar, seminar. The last 2 years we've done this webinar thing, but before that it used to be a physical seminar, and this was the time we were thinking of a very scrumptious lunch made by Western Naval Command. Unfortunately, now we'll have to have the lunch made at our houses, which I'm sure will be equally good because my wife is listening to this and listening. So thank you very much once again, all of you all, and I hope the organizers will pardon us if we've gone away from the subject, or thank us if we've done justice to the subject. So now it's over to Krishna for after that.
Thank you, Cmde Ajay Chitnis, for effectively moderating this session, and all our lead speakers for their insights on making museums a key platform for maritime history and with changing technology, changing the museum experience. Before we formally end session 2, let me highlight some key takeaways from the session, which comprise discussion around facilitating and nurturing of the maritime soft power through incubation and development of museums, memorials, and exhibition spaces, artifacts on maritime subjects through various means. At the beginning of the session, Cmde Ajay Chitnis, Vice President of IMF, rightly pointed out that museums are among the Cinderellas of the world, and more so in India and Indian Ocean region, where they are conspicuous by their action. Today, India is all set to boost with the government deciding to establish a National Maritime Heritage Museum at Lothal, in congruence to which he asserted how maritime museums hence have to be at the forefront within maritime domain, illustrating India's maritime history. To start with, Commander Mohan Narayan shared with us his contribution in the Maritime History Society, an over 4-decade-long academic initiative of Western Naval Command founded by India's great maritime icon, late Vice Admiral Manohar Praladapti. Today, MHS continues a rich journey of promoting Indian maritime wisdom through a variety of means and service. The first thing MHS did was to set up a maritime museum, which was established with active collaboration of academia and industry. He significantly assimilated us with the concept of museum and evolution of museology. With the changing technology, our minds have been faced with rapid doses of information. In this context, that idea of interacting with static objects shall be enhanced. This can happen with intangible experiences that museums can offer today. In conclusion, maritime museums must concentrate on creating experiences. Moving ahead, Ms. Batul Raaj Mehta, who has an immense experience in heritage management and is actively working towards making museums as a key part of maritime soft power. She succinctly put a detailed presentation implying formation of National Maritime Heritage Museum at Lothal, a Harapan site on the Saurashtra coast in Gujarat, a museum dedicated to country's 5,000-year maritime history. It covers 14 galleries and today is connected to contemporary ports. In cognizance, she continued to focus on how maritime museums have played a key role in India's maritime history, highlighting the development of heritage complexes and its potential to cover various historical anecdotes. She asserted 4 key areas that can give impactful experiences: immersive exhibitions, public programming, effective use of technology, and various collaborations. Museums are key enablers in reinforcing identity, preserving heritage, and most importantly, making history accessible that will stimulate and sustain maritime knowledge. Followed by that, Mr. Bharat Gothoskar, founder of KHAKI Tours, is enthusiastically working towards generating the importance of heritage and keeping it alive. He quoted famous musician Charles Mingus that making the simple complicated is commonplace, making the complicated simple, that's creative. And that is the goal KHAKI Labs is effectively contributing towards. In the similar lines, it is very important and effective to make heritage experiential. In conclusion, he beautifully put it together, explaining how maritime tourism can be looked at as locals' interaction with the sea, examining their culture and traditions. At the end, Dr. Rukshana Nanji, an archaeologist and maritime history scholar, engendered upon her work in maritime archaeology. Maritime archaeology in India is relatively young. With focusing on the importance of understanding underwater archaeology, she asserted that many thousand kilometers of coastline, an ocean named after it, and maritime activity dating back to the Harappan era, there's no question that a lot of India's history lies underwater. Underwater archaeology has involved working on the recovery of submerged remains such as ports, shipwrecks, and has studied proxy records of maritime activity from archaeological excavations as well as archival and historical records. As we know, there is much more to study all along our coast. In a related move, archaeology today can be seen as a tool or technique to be used in maritime history to tell the story of human society. The session significantly covered remarkable insights shared by the panelists, encapsulating the significant functionality of heritage spaces and building experiential museums for generating maritime consciousness and awareness. With this background, I would like to proceed towards the end of session 2 and will resume session 3. Back to you, Mrs. Meera.